I'm here with Dr. Ed Hindson, who's the Dean of the School of Religion. I'm so glad that you've joined us for these interviews. What I want to talk about are some questions that students are asking. And the real way I want to frame this is you've been in this business of education a little bit longer than I have. So I'm curious, and I think other people would be curious, is how have the questions changed over the years that students are asking about Christianity?
I should probably begin by asking you how the questions have changed in your mind. See, I've been doing this as long as you've been alive, so I think the real issue today is that students are wrestling with the real critical issues about where did the Bible come from, how do we know it's really true, what about certain claims that some things may not be factual, the kind of questions that people wrestled with always, but usually at more of a doctoral level or a graduate level. Now, kids coming right out of high school are wrestling with those questions because they're exposed to them on the internet. And so their awareness of what are the tough questions is higher than ever before, and their ability to answer them is still at a high school level, so they throw their hands up and think, I don't know the answer, so there must not be an answer.
So that's interesting, and I haven't thought about it quite in those terms. So the questions are out there, it's just they're asking at a younger age and they don't have this skill set.
Right.
So what might a pastor do, or somebody who's a parent and their kids are coming to them with these questions and they're thinking, I didn't even know that was a question. I didn't know people were criticizing the Bible in the way. What advice would you give them?
Well, for the pastors, there are plenty of resources to deal with all of these things. Even our own Bible survey books that we use here that our faculty have written deal with those kinds of questions. You know, were there really two Isaiahs or just one Isaiah? Did Moses write all of the 5 books of the Pentateuch, or were they documents that were collected over a period of time and edited together? The issues of higher criticism that, again, the average layman is probably completely unaware of. So when a teenager comes and asks those questions, the parent will tend to dismiss that as, oh, that's not important, just believe it. And then the kid's thinking, why should I believe it if it really isn't true? Well, it really is true, and there are good arguments for why it's true and good evidence for why it's true, but you need to be aware of what it is. Don't try to pretend the problem doesn't exist. Don't try to minimize the problem, but don't try to act like, oh, this is horrible, you must be a terrible unregenerate unbeliever to even raise this question in the first place, when it may be a very honest question, and honest questions deserve an honest answer. Now, sometimes young people have a question that's not really motivated intellectually at all. There's a spiritual struggle going on, and they want to believe it's not true because they don't want to deal with the spiritual issue. So you sometimes have to sort out what's behind the question. Is it the personal struggle that the young person is going through? They feel a sense of inadequacy, so how could God really love me and care about me? Why did He make me bigger, taller, stronger, better looking, or smarter, or whatever? Or is it a real intellectual question that they're wondering, you know, why isn't there a lot of evidence for the Exodus? Why is there an issue about whether there were 1 or 2 authors to the book of Isaiah, and does that really matter in light of my confidence in the inspiration of the Bible?
And sometimes you have to answer the intellectual question, or at least provide a resource before they'll let you go in deeper. And because a lot of times we're not just thinking beings, we're beings of the heart, and there's different things going on internally that we don't even realize. But for them to take us seriously and maybe trust us, we've got to actually not say, oh, don't worry about that, just believe. But we've actually got to say, well, let's work through this together. And what I would tell my people is that means that sometimes you got to pull up your sleeves and do the hard work, do the work yourself. So I'm thankful for the material that you've written, that others have written, that help us in these matters. I mean, one of the issues is you have somebody like Bart Ehrman who's writing on a very popular level, yet calling the Bible into question. Now, he's doing it from a New Testament perspective, but he's writing to the average person on the street, the average person in the pew. And if we don't have the answers, if we don't respond, if we're not engaging with those types of people, rest assured that our students, our young people, are hearing those things.
So they're not isolated from it like they might have been 30 years ago, where they wouldn't encounter those kind of questions in their church or in their personal reading. But because of the impact of the media in our generation and of the internet in particular, they'll Google up a topic they're concerned about, like I'm going to write a paper on Moses or the Exodus. They'll type in Moses, Exodus, and come up with all kinds of views and ideas, and often aren't capable of sorting out who's really credible, who's not credible in dealing with this, and why are they taking the position that they are. Now, there are great answers to these things, but you've got to be willing to dig a little bit to find them. And sometimes, just because we don't know the answer doesn't mean there isn't an answer. Like for hundreds of years, people said the reference to Hittites in the book of Genesis from the Old Testament was an error in the Bible. Nobody had ever discovered Hittites. Well, then suddenly, 100 years ago, hundreds of documents were found written by the Hittites about their culture. It's obvious there really were Hittites. The same thing was true with individuals in the Bible, like Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, whose name had been lost to history. People said this must be an error in the book of Daniel. It refers to Belshazzar. There never was a Belshazzar. And then we suddenly discover, oh yes, there was. He was the co-regent with his father. There was a reason why he told Daniel, I'll make you the third ruler in the kingdom, if you can read the handwriting on the wall, because he was only the second ruler under his father. The answer was right there in the Bible all along, and yet people overlooked it for generations. So I like to remind students in Old Testament, which I teach here at Liberty, it's all about real people, real places, set in real history. There really were Philistines and Hittites and Canaanites, and there really is a Jericho, and there really was a king by the name of Mesha who attacked Israel. There really was a guy named Sennacherib, an Assyrian, who attacked Jerusalem in the days of Hezekiah. That the stories in the Bible, one can debate the reality of them, but you can't debate people, places, names. They're all real. These are not made up mythological terms.
Yeah. That's a great point, and I want us to come back to that. We're going to do it in the next segment, but we're going to ask Dr. Hindson, since we've got him, we're going to ask him, what are some of the key questions about the Old Testament? What are some of the challenges we face as Christians who believe our Bibles, yet need to give an answer for the hope that's within us?